These songs feel like warm memories from the 1960s, the kind you hum without thinking. But behind some of the biggest hits of that era are stories filled with betrayal, tension, and emotional damage. Once you know what was really happening when these songs were written, you'll never hear them the same way again. The music still sounds great, but the backstories are anything but happy. Here are the darker truths behind some iconic 1960s songs. I Saw Her Again, the Mamas and the Papas. When people think of the mid-60s, they often picture the smooth, sunny harmonies of the Mamas and the Papas, music that feels carefree and effortless. But behind the bright image was a band slowly tearing itself apart. The group was fueled by unresolved jealousy, heavy drug use, and complicated romantic relationships that blurred every boundary. I Saw Her Again wasn't just a pop song, it was John Phillips turning real-life pain into lyrics. He wrote it after discovering that his wife, Michelle Phillips, was having an affair with fellow band member Denny Doherty. The emotional toll was brutal. Imagine being forced to walk into the studio, face the man involved, and repeatedly sing a song about your own betrayal, together. And this was only one chapter in the band's turmoil. The tension eventually became so intense that John temporarily removed Michelle from the group, replacing her with another singer. Fans reacted instantly, demanding her return. At the same time, Cass Elliot was suffering quietly. She was in love with Denny as well, making the situation even more painful. 4 people trapped in a band contract, barely able to tolerate one another, yet somehow producing music that sounded joyful and unified. There's even a famous moment in the song where the vocals enter the chorus too early. Denny rushed in by mistake, likely overwhelmed by nerves. Instead of fixing it, John chose to leave it untouched. To him, that flaw reflected the anxiety and emotional chaos surrounding the band. It was honest, raw, and real. Turn. 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 The Byrds. Few songs capture the spirit of the 1960s quite like Turn. Turn. Turn, by the Byrds. While it's remembered for its bright folk rock sound, its lyrics come from a source far older than the era itself. Nearly every line is taken directly from the biblical book of Ecclesiastes. A reflection on time, change, and human struggle. The words were first adapted into song form by folk musician Pete Seeger in the late 1950s. But it was the Byrds who transformed it into a defining anthem by adding electric energy and mass appeal. Released during a time of social unrest and the growing violence of the Vietnam War, the song resonated deeply with listeners searching for balance and meaning. In a decade filled with protest, fear, and rapid change, Turn. 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 Became something like a quiet plea for peace, a reminder that history moves in cycles, and that chaos, too, will eventually pass. Beyond chart success, the song became something much heavier, a timestamp in history. It was released just as American combat troops were being deployed overseas in large numbers, turning its plea for peace into something frighteningly real. Suddenly, the idea of a time for peace wasn't poetic, it was about survival. By pairing ancient biblical words with a bright, chiming 12-string Rickenbacker sound, the band created a bridge between generations. It spoke to parents raised on scripture and to young listeners drawn into the growing counterculture. Even the recording reflected the era's obsession with precision. The group reportedly spent 5 exhausting days and nearly 80 takes chasing the perfect vocal blend. The result was a quiet form of protest, refined, thoughtful, and deeply emotional. It reminded a divided country that hatred wasn't permanent, that healing had its season too. That message struck such a powerful chord that it achieved a strange record, the oldest lyrics ever to reach #1 on the charts. Its legacy goes far beyond musical style, it captured a shared hope that violence might one day give way to understanding. For what it's worth, Buffalo Springfield. If you've ever seen a film set in the 1960s, you've almost certainly heard the opening notes of this song. Most people assume it's a direct protest against the Vietnam War. In reality, it was born from chaos much closer to home, right on Los Angeles's Sunset Strip. In 1966, young people regularly gathered outside a club called Pandora's Box. Local authorities grew tired of the noise, the crowds, and the long hair, and began strictly enforcing curfews. What followed was explosive. Demonstrations erupted, police moved in aggressively, and the streets filled with confusion and fear. Stephen Stills witnessed it all firsthand, standing nearby as tensions boiled over. When the lyrics mention "a man with a gun," it isn't a soldier overseas, it's a police officer on an LA street corner. The situation was far more serious than the relaxed melody suggests. The Sunset Strip clashes involved over 1,000 young protesters, with well-known figures like Jack Nicholson and Peter Fonda among those arrested. Stills wrote the song in a rush, about 15 minutes, because the atmosphere was so charged. He later explained that he didn't see it as a protest anthem, but as an honest snapshot of the unease he felt watching authority close in. Even the title wasn't planned. When he played the track for a record executive, he casually said, "I've got this song here, for what it's worth." The phrase stuck. The song ended up capturing the exact moment when the optimism of the 1960s collided headfirst with power and control. The Weight, the band. Anytime "The Weight" comes on, it feels like stepping into another place, maybe a dusty porch somewhere in the American South. Even if you've never been there, the song carries an old, worn-in warmth that feels timeless. That authenticity isn't accidental. The band drew heavily from the people, names, and small-town stories they grew up surrounded by. The song began with a simple detail. Robbie Robertson noticed a stamp inside his 1951 Martin guitar that read "Made in Nazareth, Pennsylvania." That single word sparked the idea of a weary traveler arriving in a town called Nazareth, delivering a message for a woman named Fanny. What starts as a small errand quickly turns into a burden. Every person he meets asks for help, adds a problem, or hands him another responsibility until he's crushed under the collective weight of it all. What makes the song especially rich is how real it is. Nearly every name belongs to someone who actually existed. Levon Helm later shared that Carmen was based on a neighbor from his hometown in Arkansas. Anna Lee was inspired by a close childhood friend, Annalie Amstutz. Even Crazy Chester was real, a local character known for wandering around with a toy gun, acting like the town's self-appointed peacekeeper. Robertson blended these real-life figures with dreamlike scenarios inspired by surrealist filmmakers like Luis Buñuel. The result is a story about the struggle of trying to be kind when everyone keeps asking for more. That universal frustration, doing one small favor and ending up responsible for everything, has kept the song alive for decades, from Easy Rider to modern films. Fire and Rain, James Taylor. Fire and Rain remains one of the most raw expressions of grief ever captured on tape. It helped define the vulnerable singer-songwriter movement at the end of the 1960s. While the song touches on James Taylor's battles with addiction and depression, its opening verse comes from a very specific and devastating loss. The Suzanne mentioned in the lyrics was Suzanne Schneer, a close friend from Taylor's youth. While Taylor was overseas in London recording for the Beatles' Apple Records, Suzanne took her own life. In a deeply misguided attempt to protect him during an already fragile time, the people around Taylor chose not to tell him right away. Months passed before he learned the truth. By then, the world had changed without him even knowing. The song's lyrics capture that delayed shock, the feeling of grief arriving all at once, long after the moment has passed. In doing so, Taylor transformed a private heartbreak into a song that resonates with anyone who's ever faced the quiet, lonely aftermath of loss. Sunday Morning Coming Down, Chris Christopherson. Most people associate this song with Johnny Cash, but it was Chris Christopherson who lived every line of it. And the real story behind it is far darker than the typical Nashville success narrative. Before fame, Christopherson seemed destined for greatness. He was a Rhodes Scholar, a U.S. Army captain, and a man with a clear, respectable future ahead of him. Then he walked away from all of it. He chose music instead, taking a job sweeping floors as a janitor at a recording studio just to stay close to songwriting. His family didn't see it as a brave leap, they saw it as self-destruction. They cut him off completely. Alone, broke, and struggling with alcohol, Kristofferson poured that emptiness into Sunday Morning Coming Down, capturing the hollow silence of regret, loneliness, and the cost of chasing a dream when everything else has already fallen apart. Kristofferson's family eventually sent him a letter that cut deeper than any rejection letter from the music industry ever could. They told him he was a disgrace and formally cut him out of their lives. Just like that, he was alone. At the time, Chris was living in a rundown Nashville apartment, barely scraping by, young, broke, and carrying the heavy silence that comes from having no one left to fall back on. That emptiness is exactly what you hear in the lyrics. When he sings about waking up with a pounding head and searching his closet for the least dirty shirt, it isn't poetic exaggeration. It's a snapshot of a man who had lost his sense of direction, wandering through Sunday morning streets, quietly questioning whether he had destroyed his own life. There's also that legendary, almost cinematic story of how the song finally reached Johnny Cash. While working part-time as a helicopter pilot for the Army Reserve, Kristofferson reportedly diverted his flight and landed a chopper right on Cash's lawn. He walked up and handed him a demo tape. Whether or not he actually had a beer in his hand, like Cash later joked, the truth remains, the song was born from complete isolation. It captures what it feels like to give up everything for a dream and be left standing alone, realizing there's nothing quite as lonely as a Sunday morning with nowhere to belong. A Day in the Life, The Beatles. The closing track of Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band is often hailed as the peak of the Beatles' studio experimentation. But beneath its dreamlike structure lies a very real tragedy. John Lennon wrote the opening verse after reading a newspaper story about Tara Brown, a wealthy socialite and friend of the band who died in a car crash in late 1966. Lennon's calm, detached delivery turns the event into something hauntingly ordinary. Lines about blowing one's mind in a car accident strip the drama away, forcing the listener to confront how casually death can enter everyday life. Paired with the swelling, avant-garde orchestral build-up, the song contrasts personal loss with a world that keeps moving forward, indifferent and unstoppable. The result is unsettling and profound, a reminder that individual lives can end in an instant, even as the rest of the world barely pauses to notice. The Lonesome Death of Hattie Carroll, Bob Dylan. Bob Dylan had an uncanny ability to turn newspaper headlines into moral reckoning. Years earlier, he had experimented with this style in an underground song inspired by the murder of Emmett Till, a track that circulated quietly for decades. By 1963, he had perfected the approach. That year, Dylan came across the story of Hattie Carroll, a 51-year-old mother of 11 working as a barmaid at a luxury hotel in Baltimore. During a high-society event, a wealthy guest named William Zanzinger became drunk and aggressive. When Carroll didn't immediately respond to his demands, he struck her with his cane. She collapsed and died the following day from a stroke. What enraged Dylan wasn't just the violence, it was the aftermath. Zanzinger faced serious charges, but his defense minimized the incident, shifting blame onto Carroll's health. The judge sentenced him to just 6 months in jail, and even that punishment was delayed so he could finish harvesting his tobacco crop. Dylan structured the song like a courtroom transcript, instructing listeners to hold their emotions until the final verse. When the verdict arrives, the injustice becomes impossible to ignore. It's a chilling reminder that the legal system didn't exist to protect her, it existed to excuse him. Sympathy for the Devil, The Rolling Stones. As the 1960s unraveled into chaos, the Rolling Stones released Sympathy for the Devil, a song that captured the violent undercurrent of 1968. Despite its provocative title, the track isn't about glorifying evil. Instead, it examines humanity's long relationship with cruelty and power. Mick Jagger drew inspiration from the novel The Master and Margarita, which portrays the devil not as a monster, but as an intelligent observer wandering through society. This idea allowed the Stones to write lyrics that reference centuries of violence, from religious persecution to political executions. while framing the narrator as a calm witness rather than an instigator. The song evolved alongside real-world tragedy. During recording, the assassination of Robert F. Kennedy led Jagger to alter the lyrics, changing a single reference to Kennedy into Kennedys. Against the backdrop of global protests and the Vietnam War, the song became a mirror of its time. Its message was clear: evil isn't supernatural, it's woven into human history itself. I wish it would rain, The Temptations. Motown is usually associated with elegance, rhythm, and joy. But I Wish It Would Rain is drenched in sorrow. The reason it feels so painfully real is because its writer, Roger Penzabene, wasn't just composing lyrics, he was documenting his own collapse. Penzabene was a gifted songwriter responsible for several Motown hits, but behind the scenes his personal life was falling apart. He discovered his wife was involved in a long-term affair, and the betrayal left him emotionally paralyzed. The lyrics read like a plea for nature itself to hide his suffering, asking for rain so no one could see his tears. David Ruffin's vocal performance carries that weight with devastating clarity. Lines about being locked in a room weren't metaphorical, Penzabene was genuinely trapped in that mental space. The tragedy deepened when, just days after the song's release in late 1967, Penzabene took his own life at only 23 years old. He never lived to see the song become a massive hit or to know how deeply it would resonate with listeners. Every rumble of thunder in the intro now feels like an echo of a voice that never got a chance to hear how much it mattered. So many of the songs we still hum today were born from betrayal, grief, and moments of complete despair. Somehow, those broken moments were transformed into music that has lasted for generations. Now I want to hear from you. Which story stayed with you the most? Which song hit the hardest? And is there another 1960s track that changed meaning for you once you learned the truth behind it? Drop your thoughts in the comments. If you enjoyed the video, hit the like button and make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss the next story. From all of us here, this is Nostalgic Nick, reminding you to keep the needle on the record, and maybe listen a little closer next time.